So I started in reception. I think it was probably in 1980 or 1981. And I know my mum chose the school. So she herself has a relatively interesting background. So she was in the Communist Party. She grew up in Brazil. She had to leave because it was very unsafe for her. And so she was obviously quite left-wing in her view, not an independent private school, forget about it. So she'd gone to all the state schools and whatever, but none of them had really fitted. And then she definitely wasn't interested in King Alfred's because at that time it had a slightly strange reputation. A reputation for having lessons in trees and all those kind of things. But then last school, she looked at it and she was like, oh my God, this is it. This is exactly the ethos that I want. And so I started in reception. Obviously, I think most children, I was terrified at the outset. And I was there all the way through to sixth form, and it's been amazing. Like, my closest friends, still friends I met here. And weirdly, it's interesting, you organise reunions. So one of my very good friends, he organises periodic reunions himself. So it's been really interesting meeting up with people who, because I'm terrible at keeping in touch with people, like beyond my very close friends, I'm absolutely horrendous at it. And I went to a reunion relatively recently, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and what was absolutely amazing is that every single person there almost was an entrepreneur in some way. So they'd done something themselves. And that's very much my story. So I went all the way through the sixth form. I think one of the most amazing things about King Alfred's for me is the space it gives for you as an individual to discover yourself and to take risks and to learn something more about who you are rather than who the world expects you to be. And I think that goes all the way through, and it builds, in my experience, it builds all the way. And so one of the things I want most from my children, because I have 2 children here, is for them to experience sixth form, because I think it lays the foundation. And then when you're at sixth form, my experience was absolutely incredible. We had none of the resources that they have now. We had this, I won't even describe how bad it was, but it was wonderful because it was so bad. But it was always that absolute space to learn more about who you were, to express yourself both individually with teachers who were on your level rather than authority figures, but also in amongst the school collectively. So we ran various different projects, we were relatively environmental, we brought in recycling to the school for the first time. So doing all kinds of things. And so I got this real sense of that kind of anything was possible, because that's what the school had always encouraged for me as an individual and for us as a group. And so I left school having mostly really enjoyed the learning experience. I thought, right, I'm going to go to university. And me personally, I was always really bad at making decisions, so I never really knew what I wanted to do. So when it came to A-level, I couldn't decide between arts and sciences, ended up doing both. No idea what I wanted to do. Then basically knew I wanted to do university, thought, right, I'm just going to have to choose. Literally chose to do sciences on the flick of a coin rather than humanities. And then applied to Cambridge. Miracle, got in, because I was literally the worst qualified natural scientist in the entire university, because I'd done history and geography for A-level, and you just don't do that. So, initially it was an incredibly hard experience because the contrast to CAS was enormous, couldn't have been bigger, and so I really floundered at the outset. And I know a lot of people do in that setting. But eventually I found my feet, and in the end did well. It was great, it was amazing. And I think that what CAS represented to me just kind of kept me going all the way through, because it really was that sense of kind of anything is possible. Might not always happen, might not always happen exactly how you expected it to, but kind of anything is possible. So after doing my first job, even before then I was clear in some way I wanted to make a contribution. I didn't know what that looked like. But I had limited experiences of different jobs, worked as a consultant, worked in quite institutional organisations, decided, again, this was not the way I wanted to operate or work or whatever. So I got together with my best friend from King Alfred's and 2 friends from university, and we set up our own organisation. So we set up our own charity, and it was very much based on, in some ways, CAS ethos, which was that notion of development through experience and responsibility. You get given responsibility and you develop through that experience. So we set up an educational charity, working with young people from very diverse backgrounds, giving them an opportunity to basically identify a problem in their local community and tackle it. And so we set that up. I ran that for 10 years, then kind of passed that over. Yeah, and I think a lot of that was possible, and me not really ever knowing what wasn't possible came from my experience in CAS and just being given the space to take risks, to explore, all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing, it was even the space to not know was fine when I was much younger, because I didn't have a clue what I wanted. But that was okay. Like, it was okay to not know. It was okay to experiment, to take risks, and to try stuff out, and that will be okay. The encouragement to basically form your own sense of who you are and what you want has worked extraordinarily well for me. I mean, really has, because I left, as I say, with that sense of pretty much anything's possible. It might not always work out, but if you don't try, nothing happens. Yeah. And so it's that real encouragement and space to try.
And so when it came time for your children, was it obvious?
Yeah, it was obvious. It was completely obvious. So who's now my wife, because I married like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations!
We've been together 25 years, but we actually just got married.
Oh, that's exciting.
So she also grew up in North London, so we met at university, and so she went to North London Collegiate, which is like, I mean, it's amazing.
I've worked there, so I know you know it.
So you know far better than I do. It's an amazing school, but quite different. And so I think she was really clear. She was really clear that because she, interestingly enough, when her younger sister was quite a lot younger, like 8 years, they went around King Alfred's, and she was really inspired by it even then, and she was a lot younger, but it didn't have the sports facilities, didn't have any of those things. But now she was very clear, and I was very clear, yeah, just based on my experience.
So was it a relatively easy process then to go through in terms of the children coming here? And
well, we put their names down when they were born.
Okay.
So yeah, we were always really clear. And it's not that we kept massively in touch with the school, because, I mean, that's not quite true. So, I mean, with any school, I guess King Alfred's not unique, but I had such strong relationships with the teachers that taught me. And so I did occasionally see them at various different things. And it was amazing coming back, because of course when my children started, some of them were still here.
Who were they, the teachers?
Oh my goodness. So Rita, who's still kind of here.
Yeah.
Stephen DeBrett,
yes,
who runs the village. She was my DT teacher. So, I mean, Rita was amazing for me. Andrula was here till relatively recently. She was amazing as well. Laszlo, the maths teacher, amazing. So I think those are probably the ones I remember most who've been here most recently. And there are others, Keith and Edo and those kind of people. But so yeah, for me it was always, and for us I think it was a relatively simple choice and process, very easy process. And I think at least so far, both kids is working really well for, which is wonderful.
Great. That's great.
I mean, I think one of the other interesting things is maybe we always tend to exaggerate the importance of trends in the very short term, diminish them in the longer term. But I feel like the experience that CAS provides is even more important now in the modern world, given all kinds of trends, automation, all kinds of things. And I feel like the leadership CAS has at the moment is very, very thoughtful and very, very plugged in, not at all insular, which was a concern that I actually had prior, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like it's very outward focused, very thoughtful, and I think that's really, really important, particularly at the moment. I mean, it's very obvious that there's that mutual relationship, isn't it, between being a service and also learning and bringing it back and being informed to make sure that young people leaving have as integrative of an experience as they possibly can and can be as prepared as they possibly can be. Not from a knowledge, obviously, not from a knowledge point of view, but from a process point of view. So it's like, how do I go about this rather than what knowledge can I rely on? How do I go about applying myself to this? Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think my experience of university and of Cambridge was going there at the beginning was absolutely terrifying. Like the people who my peers in natural sciences, they were machines. They were absolute machines. And, you know, Freshers Week, we had exams.
What?
You know, I know, like in my subject, the only subject had actual exams. You had to prepare yourself for maths exams, and these people would just sit and work in their rooms, never come out. And the level of self, you know, but it was all, I mean, very understandably, it was always in relationship to authority rather than, I mean, it was self-directed, but it was because we were told and because it was expected, whatever. And I massively struggled with that. I hugely struggled at the outset. And, you know, I've had conversations, for example, with Rita and Andrula, who, you know, their experience is not everyone gets on at Oxbridge from King Alfred. It really doesn't work for everybody because it's so incredibly difficult, and I almost didn't survive it.
Yeah. Well, I guess you would, because of the relationships that you have with your teachers here at King Alfred, what is it that you miss so much when you go to somewhere like Cambridge or
it's
university?
So impersonal. It is so impersonal. And even though you actually have incredibly small supervisory groups, like you're in 3s and 4s, it's, I mean, I did choose sciences, but it's really, there's no uniqueness, there's no individuality, there's no space for that kind of thing, really. I think when I got to my 4th year and I did a dissertation with an amazing teacher, there was space there. It was genuinely amazing. We were doing ridiculous computational models, stuff I don't understand. But there was real space there. There was peer-based there. But it took for me to get to the 4th year for it to start happening.
Right.
Yeah, at least the academic aspect, I felt like a cog in the machine. And that was pretty hard.
And particularly difficult coming from somewhere where that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, at the beginning it was a massive shock to the system.
I can imagine. You said obviously you had these two interest things. You did obviously the science side and then the humanities side.
Yes.
So rarely, I think now, in the way that our education system narrows everything down, is that possible. So was it the King Alfred School environment, or was it your own interest, or were you just encouraged? Was that just something that you were able to keep that breadth?
I think it was because in King Alfred, I think because the relationships with the teachers are so fundamental here, that I mean, maybe this is the case anywhere, but when I was thinking about what do I choose to study, that decision is completely connected to who do you study with. And so I had amazing relationships with each of my teachers in all those areas. And, you know, I was warned, not warned, but I was saying, look, you splitting might make it harder in some areas, but we will massively encourage you to do so if that's what you choose. And also, I did 4, that wasn't normal back then either. And I couldn't decide amongst the 4. And then they were like, why don't you try 4? And okay, why not? We'll give it a go. And then you can always drop it. You can always drop one of them at any stage. In the end, I just didn't drop any of them. And I wasn't expecting to be able to go to Cambridge. I was not expecting. I did not apply the first year.
Oh, really?
No, I wasn't expecting to do as well as I did. So I did better than I was expecting, obviously. And so it was only there in my 2nd year, I thought, oh my God, I better apply. And and I did not get my first, so classic King Alfred. I was invited to an interview. Did I wear a suit? No, I did not. I was the only person in jeans. You know, I was jeans, t-shirts, and a scraggly shirt. I was the only person there. And I had 3 interviews, and I'll never forget. 2 were amazing because I'd never studied physics, and I was applying to be physical natural sciences. So I had to teach myself physics, basically. I knew nothing of physics. And he got me, he was like, how does a microwave work? I had absolutely no idea. But in the interview, he helped me think it through to work out how a microwave works. So I, got that. And then someone else, who was another amazing old lecturer. And then the final one, who was so institutional, that was my experience with him. We just did not work. Just did not work. And there was no way he was going to let me into that college. And so that was it. So I got rejected. So I got pulled. But clearly the first 2 had written sufficiently positive reviews that I got pulled by. And I guess one of the things which was tricky is hardly anyone went to Oxbridge when I was here. And so I had no experience. I didn't know what the college system was. So I literally went with my best friend from here. And we went round the colleges and we thought, that one's got tennis courts. I'm going to apply for that one. That was as far as I got. And as it turned out, it was a terrible match for me because it was about as non-cass as it got. But then I got pulled by one that was so much more King Alfred. So I landed on my feet, I cannot tell you. And I was very, very lucky. Mm-hmm. There's something about the cass ethos of that, the passion, the can-do. I know he was very intrigued by it. And he said he was very sorry they didn't take me. In the end, I was very pleased. I was very lucky because I think it would have been a very different experience had I gone to that college. But I was very touched.
Actually, it's about King Alfred though. Everybody, from whatever age children are at this school, they'll talk to you. Everybody, which is such a natural thing.
Oh,
but it's wonderful? Just not, that is not natural out there.
It's amazing. I mean, that really brought it home. And I was like, yes, that's exactly the experience that I had when I was here. It's like, and I'm going to say this at the talk, I think, King Alfred's has the wonderful balance between functional hierarchy and existential equality. So yeah, there's a functional hierarchy. The teachers are more experienced, they know more than you, they're there that teach you. But there's the existential equality, which is you're just all human beings. And we're just all working this stuff out together. And there's that real encouragement to engage with people as peers, even if they're adults. And you're treated with so much respect in that way.
Yeah.
And
it's something that
I totally agree. I mean, that's my career now.
So tell me a bit about it then.
So I didn't know that was going to be my career, but that's become my career. So I was quite environmentally motivated, as it were. And I think, as I mentioned, so we set up this charity, and it was very much about creating a platform for future environmental leaders, environmental and social leaders, but that's what it really was about. And then because when we were setting this charity up, we had no money or whatever, so I had to do 2 jobs, and one of the jobs I did was with a developmental NGO, and I was incredibly lucky. I got to go to Johannesburg for the Sustainability Summit in 2001, and very quickly realised that the environment wasn't about environment. The environment's fine. It's all about people, really. The environment and the world will get on its own quite nicely, thank you very much. It's us. If you really want to engage with the environment, it's really about people. And so I now describe myself as a people geek. This is who I am. So having left the charity Envision, so now I'm basically a consultant for organisations of social purpose. So social enterprises, public sector, voluntary sector, whatever it is. I support big and small organisations, and a lot of it is based on people. So I do organisational development, I'm a trainer, and I'm completely fascinated by people. It's basically what I've made my career from.
Tell me about what you love about your job.
Oh my goodness. So...
aside from the people, obviously.
No, I mean, so I think, what do I love about my job? The first thing I love about my job is I am of service in some way. So without a doubt, that is the thing that moves me the most. So I get to work with all these organisations and all these amazing people who are already being of service, and I just try and support them to be more effective and to help them be more effective at what they do in all kinds of different areas. So some organisations I'll work around strategy and theory of change and measuring social impact. Others I'll work on organisational culture, but I'm a communication skills trainer, all kinds of different stuff. But every single organisation or person I work with has chosen a life to be of service in some way, and then I just get to work with them in partnership with them, and that's amazing. So that's the first thing I absolutely love about my job. I guess the other thing is it's very varied, so I do all kinds of different things, which is wonderful, keeps me interested, because when I said I ran a charity for 10 years, I very quickly realised I was very good at beginning things, I was much less good at maintaining them. And so needed someone else to come in and hand over to be much better at that than I was. And so now I get to initiate all the time, because every single project I work on is a new project, and I get to start almost from scratch and co-create it with them and imagine what we want and how we're going to get there. So that's an amazing process. It's like it's a birth every time. It's a newness every time. And I love that, the creativity of it. That's wonderful. Yeah, I get to work at home a lot. I get to see my kids. Yeah. I have a tiny organisation with hardly any overheads, so the freedom is wonderful. I love working for myself. I've worked for myself since I was 24, and so I'll never work for anyone else. I just absolutely love it. And of course, you never stop working. You're always on. Yeah. If you work for yourself, but I love that. I love the control, I love the freedom.
And you mentioned that in terms of your friends from school, that you were involved with setting up the charity with them as well.
I was, so I had my best friend when I was here, so he and I basically did it together, plus my now wife who I'm at university, so she and another friend from university, so yeah, we did it all together, basically.
And you mentioned about being of service, and you're not the first. We have a number of Alfredians who've talked about that. What is it that means so much to you?
It's almost a question I'm not sure I can answer because it's so fundamental to who I am. I just can't imagine doing anything else. And one of the amazing things is having Eva, my daughter, so she's now 13, and having her reach a certain age. So we've always been relatively environmental, always, like in everything that we do. But what became incredibly clear is how the older she got, it was almost like my conscience, it was like a leash that got tightened and tightened and tightened. So now it was like I cannot compromise my values. So we don't fly, we don't eat meat, we're everything, because I cannot, with my kids, I absolutely cannot be a hypocrite. Now that I was always doing that to some extent, but not 100%. I'm not squeaky clean now. I mean, there are countless things I don't do properly. But what was amazing is as she got older, the pressure just increased and I just could not do this. So yeah, it's such a fundamental part of who I am and the satisfaction I get from work.
Sort of changing shift. Are there places at King Alfred, places that mean a lot to you?
Oh yeah, oh my goodness. So I think Squirrel Hall means a huge amount just because it was always the place you were passing through on the way to somewhere else. So it was almost like the central connection point, at least when I was in the upper school, and just moving, because the green building was just built when I moved up. It was literally just built. And so moving from there out, and so it feels like it's almost like it's a beating heart in some ways for me. My best friend who I started the charity with, he and I got our exam results and went and opened them up by the tubes. The tubes are still here, I think, aren't they? The concrete tubes?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember opening them on those, and both of us did better than we expected, so we went ballistic, and that was hilarious. And I remember from those tubes, from being in the lower school, and just endless games of Kip the Can, and that was what we just played all the time, so I remember that really strongly. I remember the low school hall in the corner. I remember watching Dulcie, the goat give birth.
Oh, did you?
In there. So
in the school hall?
In the school hall. So they brought them in, they brought the entire of the lower school in to watch her give birth, and it was an extraordinary experience. Of course, when you're that young, you're like, why on earth are we doing this? What are you doing? But yeah, it was an incredible experience. I remember my first day of school, and so I remember what's now the music room. Camilla's music room was reception when I was there. And what's amazing is that because of course it was my first day of school, I was terrified. I have really strong memories of that space, and of course now it's a music room, and most weeks I take my son Luke there, he's in a band, and we do band practice in the morning in that same space. So yeah, it's mad, right? And I'd say it's been really weird taking your kids into school. There's a way in which I've never left, but of course I have, 25 years, but there's a way in which it's just the same.
That's really special. Like, when you talk about Squirrel Hall, because everybody talks about Squirrel Hall, what exactly did it kind of look like when you were here?
I think it had wooden kind of panels at different angles over the top of it, and there was the knotty tree trunk at the base, and then you basically had the uneven paving on the ground with the pillars, wooden pillars. I have no idea if any of that's true. Yeah, we used to play games there and just walking through it, chatting in it. It just feels like it was in some ways a beating heart of break time, particularly obviously because everyone's out and doing stuff. I think one of the other really special things you're making me remember is the camps. Yeah, so camps I remember because of how seriously Cass took them. Cycling trips, walking trips, up in Scotland with Keith and whatever. Those, I have very strong memories of those. Not always comfortable by any means. Not always comfortable. That was one of the amazing things about Cass, which is it did push you. It really pushed you as an individual. It really stretched you. It created a very safe space and then stretched you in all kinds of different ways to discover more, because I remember, and I was terrible at it, I think, but for example, in history at A-level, we had the most amazing, we were doing 20th century Cold War politics, which was, it's not quite as, recent now, but it was very recent then, and it was an amazing subject, and of course, because of that, there was still lots and lots of discussion about it. We were really encouraged to form arguments, to think for ourselves and whatever, and I'm not sure I was very good at the time, I really don't think I was, but I think it really helped me. That stretch really helped, and I floundered for ages. I was like, no, but isn't there a right answer? No, there's not a right answer. What do you think? I was like, I don't know. What's the right answer? Please tell me the right answer. There is no right answer, just come up with an argument, whatever you feel it is, support that argument. You can look at the counter arguments, that's okay. So I think, eventually I got there, but it was quite a journey, but that kind of stretch that they provided, which was both the encouragement but also the challenge, was amazing. Are we trying to win or are we trying to build understanding?
Yeah.
I remember doing a careers talk here, which was really fun in the Green Building a number of years ago. This is well before COVID. And Beth actually, my wife, she had year 12 with her this week.
Oh, did she? Oh, great.
Yeah, so she's a GP, and so she had it her in practice, which was lovely. So I have one of our really good friends from King Alfred who's much, 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 much better at this than I am. He's a very good friend of mine. We meet up relatively regularly anyway. So he organised one a few years ago, and it was amazing. We had like 20, 25 people come from our year and year below. And so that was a lot of fun. So he's organising another one for later this year.
Oh, fantastic.
His name is Mitchell.
Okay.
Mitchell Patel.
Okay. Oh, great.
He's brilliant.
But once an old Alfredian, always an old Alfredian.
Always an old Alfredian, exactly.
That's so good. What's the naughtiest thing that you did at school then? Were there things that you can tell us about?
So this is hilarious though. So this is so not naughty, but it was really naughty for me because I was in reception, and this was one of the very first experiences I had of really, particularly to authority figures, to a teacher. We were doing a milk project where the teacher had brought in a number of different types of milk. This is when you used to get, we still get bottled milk.
Yeah.
We used to get bottled milk, and you get all the different foil tops with different colours, the golds and the silvers and the reds and the pinks and all those kind of things. And so we had this tasting thing, and of course the creamy ones were amazing. And so we all went round. Everyone had one. You're only allowed one, of course, because there's not enough. And then she came back to me and said, "Have you had the creamy one?" Of course I had. And I said, "No." So I had a second bit, second healthy one, and I was like, what on earth was I doing? I was so not that kind of kid, it was hilarious. And then my second naughty thing, these are so not naughty, but also in lower school, I was a musician, so I was a violinist, and I played violin from when I was 4, all the way through. But I remember this particular recorder lesson where, obviously it was so unbelievably boring. I think everyone found it really, really boring. And I think I had a watch, and the teacher watch was broken on the thing, and said, "Has anyone got the time?" And I do, yeah, and said, "Okay, what's the time?" And I just basically said it was the end of the lesson, and it wasn't. It was half an hour left. And so we all went in, and everyone out to play, and no one else was out. And then basically this teacher was like, "What are you doing?" And then of course by the time everyone was over the moon and ecstatic, but it wasn't going to be the easiest thing to be able to hide. Right, so that was completely hilarious.
Your music obviously is important to you. Did you carry on playing after school or take up different instruments?
I took up a different instrument. So at the age of 16, changed instrument, started guitar instead, which is almost the same basically. So yeah, and I played ever since. And so that's been wonderful. Actually, one of my favourite experiences, probably, if not up there with my top favourite experiences as a parent of Cass, was when Eva she was probably in year 4, maybe, something like that. I think it was Camilla, I can't remember who did it, but invited me to play along with her. So in one of the musical concerts, we did a Beatles piece together. So she was doing a melody and I was just doing the chords, and that was like one of my complete...
How wonderful that they do that.
Heart-melting moments. I mean, it was just completely phenomenal. And it's a wonderful thing, like, whenever I and to share that as a gift. So, you know, in our living room, we've got all our guitars, we've got a bass, we've got 4 guitars, we've got sets of amps, and they're all there. And it's a family thing. Eva has hers, she's got 2, Luke's got his, he's got 2, I've got 2, we've got bass. It's amazing. So it's not only the continuation, but it's then the passing it on. And I mean, the music department in the school is phenomenal. And yes, the equipment is amazing, but the people are amazing. Like Camilla and Dan and Nevin, Rob and Dave. I mean, they're amazing people, and they are so incredibly encouraging. It was completely amazing. And I love like watching Luke, his experience of being in a band and performing here. I mean, I think that's some of his highlights of his school experience, and that's just completely incredible. And it teaches you so much about, because they have to work really hard as individuals and collectively, and they're really young, and it's amazing. I was in orchestras, and when I was here, we had a guy who was the year below, a guy called Matthew Trussler, and he became an international violinist. I mean, he was his profession. And he was completely amazing. He was extraordinary to play along. I mean, of course, I was not a shadow on him, but it was incredible to play along with him.
Yeah.
And watch and see what was possible. I think one of the things which is amazing is being a parent, I think, helps me get a little bit of objectivity about my experience here. Because, of course, reconnecting and seeing it through different eyes then gives me a little bit of objectivity for what it was when I was here. And I think, I just have a lot more gratitude now. I mean, I always knew it was an amazing school, and I always knew that it was, I mean, to say I was really clear it was going to be that for my kids. The equipment and the facilities are much better than they were. We were blessed. I'm not saying we really weren't, but they are absolutely incredible now. I mean, the way the school has incrementally built that over the years, quite literally, where basically wherever there was a 1-story building when I was here, there's now a 2-story building. Wherever there's a 2-story building, there's now a 3-story building. So it's literally, it's like, right, we're just building up because there's more space, so we're building up. So I don't know, it feels like the school is better resourced, more intentional now than it's been in the past, because when we were here, you know, there was a Cass ethos, but no one really knew what that was. No one knew what that was, and no one, you know, like there's a dear friend who's a parent of someone in Eva's year, a guy called Tom, who's incredibly thoughtful and very, very smart, and we'd have these conversations, you know, about like the Cass ethos, but what does that actually mean? Everyone has a different interpretation of that. And I think the leadership at the moment is amazing, because they've really worked hard. Robert's really worked hard to codify it. He's identified the problem, and he's like, right, it's not a problem, what the opportunity. And he's like, right, we're actually going to codify that so we know what that means. Now we actually have a really clear understanding what that means. And of course that then helps you be a lot more intentional and a lot more conscious with your decisions, which is great. And so it's just a feeling that I have. I feel things are slightly less random than they used to be. Things were a lot more random. At least that's how it felt. Maybe that was just because I was a kid. Like a very funny experience that we had where we went through one period of having zero consistency in history teachers. So like absolute zero. So in this run of supply teachers, we had one, I think he actually was a geography teacher. So he was so not cast that basically if you were talking, he would pick up the rubber, the proper board eraser wood thing, right? Okay. So he basically threatened to throw it. Like this guy was so not cast, it was hilarious. But of course, because no one had been exposed to that form of leadership or whatever, it just didn't work at all. So anyway, you did have the sense that stuff was ever so slightly more random back then, which it just does not feel that way anymore. It feels a lot more professional, a lot more intentional, but having not lost, the caste ethos. So the organisation that I set up with my great friend from here and 2 others, as I said, like one of the things that we were really clear in is that we were going to run it in the same way as the caste culture was, which is basically like a family. So we ran it like a family. Irrespective of seniority, you only ever spoke in circles, everyone was supported to do whatever they want, make the decision they wanted to make, and all those kind of things. And what was amazing about it, and there was a shadow side to this too, because of course, everyone who joined the organisation, it was basically a bit like drinking the Kool-Aid. You were in, and you were like envisioned for life. And it was a bit like caste, being an old visionary. You always came back, you always kept connected. And when you were in the organisation, you gave your absolute heart and soul for it, everything. It wasn't a job, it was an entire way of life.
A vocation.
It was an entire, and we burnt people out horrendously, like we're desperately trying to get the balance right because everyone gave so much. And it grew, so we had all offices around the country, and of course, that was really hard, so how do you keep the culture while you grow? But when the new CEO came in, and they asked the question, like, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge when, after 10 years? And I basically said to them, is just keeping the culture alive, basically, keeping the culture alive. And she is really interesting, she's an amazing woman, and she then also ran it for the next 10 years. She would often say that to me, that was the one thing that she remembers. And I think that's the amazing thing about what it feels like CAS have done. It's like, yes, it's got more professional, it's got bigger, in many ways, like physically or whatever, but the focus on the culture and the ethos, because they've been able to codify it, because it's so much more intentional now, feels like they've really worked hard at maintaining that. So it's not lost, and I think it's the most precious thing that exists here, really. And so it feels like it's really alive and well.